Baby Yoda will show up at your doorstep for you to love him if you play the theme from The Mandalorian, so I'll show you how. If you look in the description, you will find a link to the sheet music so you can follow along with your like instrument. Also, stick around for a trombone quartet arrangement at the end of the video. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to play the theme from The Mandalorian. This is about halfway through the piece when the horns come in, so there's a lot of stylistic things that are really cool with this piece that I want to pick apart and show you how to play it. I could just give you the notes and say go for it, but I'm actually going to pick it apart and show you how I would interpret this piece. So the first bar sets us up for the rest of the piece, so we're going to focus on it for a little while, and then we're going to take what we learned from it and apply it throughout the rest of the little thing. So it's marked 80, but when we're practicing it, let's try to start at 60 for a little while, and then we'll work our way up to 80. Okay, so the first bar is marked forte. So let's make sure that we have a lot of power behind it when we're playing. Okay, so the first two notes, 2 16th notes with staccato dot over them. So the rule I learned is when you have a 16th note with staccato dots over it, you should use the dut syllable. This is so that you can get it as short as it needs to be, but you don't want to make it too short because then you lose the body of the note and it doesn't even really sound like a note. So that U and DUT is really important. So it's more like a dut, dut, instead of dut. It's dut, dut, dut. Okay. The next note has an accent over it, so it's going to be emphasized more than the other two notes. So da. D-A-H is what I would use, the syllable I would use for that. So, da. Okay, next are 2 more 16th notes with the staccatos over them. So it would be interpreted the same as it would over here. So, da. Okay. The next note is an accent with a slur going to the next note. So it would be emphasized, but it would not be short. It would actually be connected to the next note. So it's sort of like a springboard. It would do. So it would have a lot of emphasis on the downbeat, but then when you get to the upbeat, it's sort of like it's not as powerful. It just leads to that upbeat, and that upbeat has a staccato dot over it, so it would be sort of not really clip, but more of like a da, the diaphragm release. Do da, do. So. So let's then we have the beat 4. It's accented and it would go all the way to the downbeat. So it would sound like da 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 do da. Okay. And if you look at measure 1 and you look at measure 3, they're basically the same. Like everything but the beat 4 is a different note. So you can practice measure 1 and measure 3 back to back, sort of, and we'll practice it 60 beats a minute first with your metronome going. And just practice them, and then crank the metronome up to 70 or so, or 75, and then finally 80. And then once you master those 2 measures, we'll move on to measure 2. Moving on to measure 2 and 4, we use the same rules that we learned in measure 1 and 3 and apply them to measure 2 and 4. So the first beat is actually the same as beat 1 in measure 1. So you're going to rest on the downbeat, and then on the upbeat you're going to play 2 16th notes that are staccatoed. So they have the dut articulation. Dut. Okay, same as before. What's different is now on beat 2, you're going to hold this quarter note tied to this 8th note and hold it until the and of 3. And it's also going to be accented. So it's going to sound like da 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 off. Okay. After that, you're going to play a concert B flat on the of 3, 1 E and there's a B flat, leading to beat 4. So, da da da, dee da da da. Okay. All of these 16th notes right here are going to be the same articulation, except for this one with the accent over it. They're all going to be the same length. It's just that this one is going to have more of an emphasis. Okay. Now, let's practice just this measure and get it, under our fingers. Practice it at 60, bump it up to 70, and then finally at 80 once you get 60 and 70 mastered. And then move on to measure 4, and you'll do the same thing. It's the same articulations, just different notes. And then once you have it mastered, try to start at the beginning and work your way through measure 4, 60, 70, and then finally 80. And then we'll move on to measure 5. Finally, we make it to measure 5. In this measure, we have the basic syncopation. So with that comes some style rules. So whenever you see syncopation, typically you want to make the first note, this 8th note here, you want to make it softer than the quarter note, and softer and shorter than the quarter note. You want to make the quarter note more emphasized and end it on the downbeat of the next beat. So it starts on the upbeat, and it actually is cut off on the downbeat. And then usually you'll either see another quarter note like this one, which would be identical in style, or you'll see the end of the syncopation with another 8th note. So the downbeat is going to be short and soft. The upbeat is going to be more emphasized and cut off on the downbeat of 2. And then this is going to be on the upbeat, and it's going to be about the same level as the first 8th note. So it's going to sound like dee da off, dee, okay, dee da off, dee, or da 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 da. You want more of a da. You don't want a T on 8th notes. More of a diaphragm da 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 off da. And now you have a quarter note on the downbeat, so that's pretty simple. And since it is an accent followed by a staccato, you'll actually release this beat on the end of 1, 2, 3. The end of 3, this note will be cut off, and it's more emphasized. Deep da off on the downbeat. And then we have an 8th note that's softer, but it's still shorter. It's going to be about a 16th note's length, and it's followed by an 8th note that's accented, tied to another quarter note. So, starting here, it would be da off, dee da 1 off. So you're going to actually hold this through the next bar at landing on 2. So you'll release on 2. So measure 5 will sound like this. Da 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 da. Okay, so practice that a few times. That's sort of tricky to get syncopation under your belt the first time. But start out at 60 and work your way up to 80. And then we'll move on to measure 6. So after holding this to the downbeat of 2 into this triplet, these 2 triplets, you release on 2, and then you'll come in on this A flat, or constant A flat, if you're looking on with any other part. It'll be 1 off a lit, so you'll actually count these as thirds, and I say triplet. Some people say 1 lolly, 2 lolly. I like triplet because that's just what I've learned. That's how I was raised. So you hold that 1 off a lit, triplet 4. So you see they have these lines over them. These lines are called tenutos. They basically mean that you should connect everything that it's over. And this one has a tenuto and an accent, so it'll have an emphasis and it'll still be connected. Same here with this concert B natural. So starting back at the beginning of measure 6, 1 off a lit, triplet 4, 1 to that whole note to the end. So let's start at measure 5. Let's call measure 5 to the end. We'll call that another place where you can loop and try to get it under your belt. So you'll start at 60, work your way to 70, and then finally 80. And then once you get that done, try to put the whole thing together, keep the dynamic in mind. And if you look real close, you'll see that just about every downbeat is accented. That's what I put an accent mark over. And this just sort of makes the piece move a little bit, feel like it has a little bit of a direction to it. And yeah, so this the dynamic changes at the end with the decrescendo, and it sort of decrescendos into nothing, and then you'll cut it off. Now, before we move on to the trombone quartet arrangement of this piece, I want to try to get an idea of my audience. I would say this is a little too difficult for, say, a middle schooler or someone fresh out of beginner band, but I think this is doable for halfway through high school or maybe senior year of high school. I want to get an idea of like what you want to see from me. Is this too difficult? Is this too short? Is this too long? Is this not memey enough for you? If you leave recommendations in the comments, I'll look at them and see what I think, and if there's enough, votes on any of them, then I'll make sure I can do them. Thanks for watching, and enjoy.